Hi everyone, welcome to our next episode of Cooking with Murney Tower. I'm Annie, and as you've seen me through all the other episodes, we're going to continue in the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment's very strict schedule. When I created this cooking channel, I wanted to follow their schedule, so we started with bread because they'd have that in the morning with their coffee. Then we made stew, which they would have around 1 p.m. And now we're going to do afternoon tea, which would be around 4 o'clock. So for afternoon tea, the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment only had 1/6 ounce of tea and 2 ounces of sugar. Now, that doesn't seem like a lot, and unfortunately, there's no record of them eating anything with their tea, which is very common for a British soldier's break. All throughout history, you can see wartime photographs of soldiers enjoying a cup of tea with their comrades, but you don't really see them eating anything but maybe like a rationed cookie or an item depending on what era it is. So one can deduce from these photographs and from the future, the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment probably didn't receive much in terms of a snack. However, we're going to follow the tradition of afternoon tea in the Victorian era as a whole, because they ate a lot of food with afternoon tea. So you must be wondering, where did this tradition come from? This tradition of afternoon tea started with the 7th Duchess of Bedford, who was the lady-in-waiting for Queen Victoria. Because their evening meal was getting later and later for dinner, she started describing this afternoon slump after lunch, between lunch and 5 p.m., saying that she was tired and she was hungry. And I'm sure all of us can relate to this. So she requested tea being brought up to her with some cakes, bread, and butter. And then this fashionable afternoon tea tradition was born. And then, of course, more and more items were added to the table. And by the Victorian era, though, tea drinking was very heavily common throughout all echelons of society, whether you be the Duchess of Bedford or a regular soldier in the Royal Canadian Rifle Regiment. This experience differed, of course, by the material culture of your table. Now, as you've probably seen in our other videos, we have the Gardner collection, which features a bunch of royal memorabilia, particularly teaware, from all different eras. Not from all different eras. It does have all different eras of the royal family depicted on these pieces of teaware, but you can tell they're all of different quality. So they were most likely enjoyed by all different social standings of society, whether it be your regular average person having tea or someone like the Duchess of Bedford. However, for the wealthy, it came with a whole host of accessories like porcelain teacups, teapots, bowls, saucers, decorative items like mahogany tea caddies, silver urns. All sort of items were a part of the wealthy person's tea table, and they enjoyed buying different types of tea items to show their own personal interests, which is why you have so many different designs on teaware. Now, you may be thinking, what did the Victorian afternoon tea look like? And it's actually pretty much the exact same of what you would have today, with those little finger cucumber sandwiches specifically, as well as tarts, scones, cakes, and all of those items you would see in the Victorian era. But to make it a real Victorian experience, you might want to add a nice glass of sherry with it. So, after this little history about tea and scones, this recipe I'm using today is adapted from a couple recipes from 1945 that I found in Lindy Machevsky's cookbook Out of Old Ontario Kitchens, as well as some recipes I found researching in British archives online. But the recipe I'm using is kind of changed based on my testers that I've made before making this video. So this is kind of like my own adapted recipe. I'm putting the recipe and instructions as written instructions as well, so you can pause the video whenever you'd like to read them at the end, as I have done in the other editions of this cooking channel. So let's get started. Hey everyone, let's get started making our scones. First thing you should do is preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have a convect oven, I would say to definitely use that feature. My oven doesn't have that feature, so I'm just putting it on bake. You need all-purpose flour. I'm using unbleached. You don't have to. Use salt. I'm just using regular old salt. However, I'm using salted butter because that's all I have. If you're using unsalted butter, follow the recipe. Since I'm using salted, I'm just gonna add a quick pinch. I don't wanna add too much because my butter's already salted, obviously. You need cold butter. This is very important. I popped mine in the freezer for a couple minutes before starting this video from the fridge. You need baking powder, which I just have the good old magic baking powder here. You need 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, which I have some white sugar here. You need 3/4 cups of milk. I'm gonna use whole milk because the more fat you have in your scones, the better flavor they will have. Some people use heavy cream and no butter, but my recipe, I'm using butter and whole milk. You need vanilla extract and 1 egg. So let's get started. In your large bowl, which I have here, you want to mix in flour, salt, baking powder, and sugar. Basically all of your dry ingredients. So let's get started there. Ignore all my pantry mess behind me. There's a brand new bag of flour, which is exciting. Okay. So we need 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. You need a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Since my butter is salted, like I said, I'm just gonna do a quick pinch. 3.5 teaspoons of baking powder. So let's get my measuring spoons. Okay. Now, I have to add my sugar. Of course, you will always need to have your recipe in front of you when you're cooking. You always want to double check all of your ingredients as you go. So 3 tablespoons of sugar. Now these scones can also be changed. So you might want to add cheese or raisins and cinnamon. They're very versatile. However, I'm going very traditional with these, so I'm just going to make them the plain vanilla that will go with the jam and cream. So now that I have all of these ingredients, I am going to mix it. So when you add the cold butter, you might want to use a butter knife and break it up in pieces as you go, or break it up with your hands. The goal is to have it very fine in small pieces because that helps create layers in your scones. For me, because I'm a little lazy, I'm just going to grate it with the cheese grater and pop it in and mix it as I go. So I need 1/2 cup of butter. Okay, now try to do this as fast as possible because you want your butter to stay as cold as possible. I'm going to quickly grate these into small pieces. And I find if any side I'm holding gets warm, I then turn it around and grate that side. Just give it a small tap if any of it's stuck in there, which is definitely what's happening to me. Because again, butter's very melty already from the warmth in my apartment. So I would recommend making this in a very cool and dry place. Today's pretty cool outside from all the rain we've been having, but my apartment doesn't have air conditioning, so I find I have to work really fast with these scones. So I'm just gonna move this out of our way. Wash my hands again after dealing with all that butter. And now I'm gonna mix this last chunk I put in into my dry ingredients. Use your spatula to break it up if it's stuck. But I find the cheese grater really helps speed up the process. As you see, I'm making a mess. Okay, so after that, we want our other wet ingredients. So in a separate container, I'm using a measuring cup. We want the milk, and the egg, and vanilla extract. Okay, so I'm gonna add my whole milk in here, which is the 3/4 cup. There we go. And I want to add my egg, which I have over here. And no. There we go. And then we want our vanilla extract, which can be any kind. I'm using a vanilla bean one, but again, doesn't matter. And I just estimate a teaspoon because I don't like wasting the vanilla bean in a cup because you lose some of it in your teaspoon when you measure it. So I just kind of guess. You never have too much vanilla, I say. So once you have an evenly mixed mixture in your measuring cup, we're going to create a well in the center of our bowl and add it to the dry that has the butter in it. So remember, the butter has to go in first. And now we want to gradually add this in till it's a workable dough. So with your clean hands, and it's mostly mixed at this point, I'm gonna put it on my workable surface, which is my table here that I just wiped before filming. And now we are going to quickly knead the dough. So the big tip I have for kneading is you don't want to overwork this dough because you'll end up with very heavy, mushy scones. Because the warmth from your hands will melt that butter, and then you'll have a very chewy scone, and that's not what you want. I also should have floured my surface before, which I'm going to do now. Up here, let me just flour my area because we don't want stickiness. And I'm just quickly and lightly kneading my dough, kind of I'm going to pat it into a round circle, which I'm going to use a rolling pin for this. You can also use a cookie cutter if you'd like, but I am using just a knife, and I'm cutting it like a pizza to make those nice triangular scones. And then you have less wastage if you don't use a cookie cutter. So I think that's a pretty good thickness. And now it's good enough as a circle as it's gonna be. I am going to cut it with just my regular knife here. It has a bunch of butter on it, so I'm just gonna spread that on there. So I'm just gonna cut it in half and then measure it accordingly. So the goal of your dough is to look like this, with a bunch of layers. So when you bake this, it's going to be nice and layered like a pastry. And Lindsay, so now we're just going to arrange these on my tray. So now we want to brush these with a bit of a milk mixture. So whatever I have left in my measuring cup from the start, I'm just gonna add a tiny bit of milk to that because I had a drop left in the bottom of my measuring cup. Let's get a brush or something, and you want to brush the tops. And I'm just gonna sprinkle a bit of white sugar on it. Now, we are going to bake these for 10 to 15 minutes. You want them to be risen and golden on the top. So, I'm gonna put these in the oven and I will show you how they look at the end with some jam. Hey everyone, so the scones are done. So I'm gonna have my own afternoon or cream tea. I do not have cloudy cream. It's very hard to come by. It's a little difficult to make, but these are the final products of the scones. As you can see, they're nice and gold on the top, and all their layers are very well defined, which is the goal of using all those cold, wet ingredients. So I thought I would enjoy some of mine, so they don't fall, with some raspberry jam. And I do have one nice set of teacups and a saucer and a plate, so I thought I would have my own version of a cream tea. They're super good. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and cheers!